Taemin stood before the great communication array, his blue skin pale with fear. The machines had come 3 days ago. They appeared from the void like metal storms, their ships dark against the stars. The Nexus swarm showed no mercy. They took everything, minerals, water, air, even the bones of the dead. They left nothing behind but empty rock floating in space. The Valari Republic had lasted for 2,000 years. They were a peaceful people who solved problems with words, not weapons. Their ships carried medical supplies and trade goods, not guns. When conflicts arose between worlds, they sent diplomats with gifts and kind words. It had always worked before, but the Nexus swarm did not want to talk. They did not want gifts. They wanted resources, and the Valari worlds had many resources. The machines came in waves, each one bigger than the last. They cut through the Valari defense fleet like it was made of paper. The few surviving ships fled to the homeworld, bringing news of total defeat. Taemin touched the communication controls with shaking hands. He was the last living member of the High Council. The others had died when the first wave of machines attacked the capital city. The building still burned behind him, filling the air with smoke and the smell of melted metal. He needed to call the ethereal commune. They were old friends of the Valari. They would send medical ships and negotiators. Maybe they could talk to the machines, find some way to make peace. The ethereal were wise and patient. They had stopped wars before by finding common ground between enemies. The message beacon activated with a soft hum. Taemin spoke slowly and clearly into the recorder. His people had used this same message format for centuries when they needed help from their allies. This is Ambassador Taemin of the Valari Republic Council. We request immediate peaceful intervention and humanitarian assistance. Our worlds face destruction from hostile mechanical entities. We need medical aid, diplomatic support, and refugee transport. Please send help to these coordinates. Time is short. Many lives depend on your swift response. He sent the message through the old relay network. The signal would bounce from station to station across the galaxy, following paths carved by ancient civilizations. It would take time to reach the ethereal commune, but they would come. They always came when friends needed help. What Taemin did not know was that the relay stations were very old. Some had been floating in space for 10,000 years. Their translation systems broke down over time. Words changed meaning as they passed through damaged circuits and corrupted databanks. The message left the Valari homeworld intact. But as it jumped from relay to relay, small errors crept in. Peaceful intervention became military intervention. Humanitarian assistance became immediate combat support. Medical aid turned into weapon deployment. Each relay station added its own mistakes to the growing pile of confusion. Far across the galaxy, on a small monitoring station orbiting Earth's moon, Communications Officer Bora was finishing her night shift. She had been listening to space chatter for 6 hours, logging routine trade messages and navigation updates. Nothing interesting ever happened on the night shift. Then the beacon signal arrived. Bora sat up straight as her equipment decoded the message. The computer translated it from the Valari language into Earth Standard, but the translation was based on the corrupted data from the relay network. What appeared on her screen made her heart race. Request immediate military intervention. Hostile machine force requires total elimination. Enemy overwhelming friendly forces. Send combat fleet to coordinates. Urgent, many human lives at risk. Bora read the message 3 times. Human lives at risk? She had never heard of humans living in that sector of space. But the coordinates were clear, and the request for military help was impossible to ignore. She grabbed her communication headset and called Admiral Dong Ho at Earth Defense Command. Admiral Dong Ho was a veteran of the border wars, the conflicts that had shaped humanity's expansion into space. He had gray hair and scars on his face from fighting pirates in the outer systems. When Bora's call woke him from sleep, he listened carefully to every word. "Send me that message immediately," he ordered. Within minutes, the corrupted beacon signal appeared on his personal screen. He read it twice, then called his staff officers to an emergency meeting. The situation seemed clear to Dong Ho. Somewhere in space, humans were under attack by hostile machines. The Earth Defense Force existed for exactly this kind of emergency. They had trained for years, building ships and weapons to protect human colonies from alien threats. This was their first real test. "Activate the 3rd Fleet," Dong Ho ordered. "Full combat deployment. I want our best ships and our best crews. If humans are dying out there, we're going to save them." Captain Haijin received her orders while docked at Luna Station. She commanded the battleship Soul's Pride, the newest and most powerful ship in the Earth fleet. Her crew was young but experienced, veterans of anti-piracy operations in the Outer Rim. They had never fought aliens before, but they were ready. "All hands to battle stations," Heejin announced over the ship's intercom. "We have a rescue mission. Human civilians are under attack by hostile aliens. We're going to bring them home." The Third Fleet assembled quickly. 12 battleships formed the core, surrounded by 40 destroyers and hundreds of fighter craft. The ships were painted in Earth defense colors, dark blue with silver trim. Their hulls bristled with weapons that had been designed by human engineers who believed in overwhelming firepower. Within 6 hours of receiving the message, the fleet was ready to depart. Dongho gave the final order from his command ship, the massive dreadnought Busan Thunder. Jump coordinates locked in. All ships report ready. Execute hyperspace jump in 3, 2, 1. Jump. Space twisted around the human fleet as they entered hyperspace. Their destination was a star system they had never seen before. To fight an enemy they knew nothing about. To save people who were not actually human. Back on the Valari homeworld, Taemin watched the sky through his office window. More machine ships had arrived during the night. They hung in orbit like metal vultures, waiting to begin the final harvest of his world. He wondered if his message had reached the ethereal commune yet. He had no way of knowing that instead of medical ships and diplomats, he had accidentally summoned the full military might of humanity's war machine. The most aggressive species in the galaxy was now racing through hyperspace, convinced that their own people were in mortal danger. The Valari were about to learn what happened when humans thought their friends were in trouble. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace like thunder. One moment the Valari system was empty except for the machine ships. The next moment, 52 human warships materialized in perfect formation, their weapons already charging for battle. Captain Hyejin stood on the bridge of Soul's Pride, staring at the tactical display. The screen showed dozens of alien contacts. Some were small and organic-looking. Those had to be the human civilian ships under attack. The others were massive geometric shapes that could only be enemy warships. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Wu Jin, the tactical officer. "Look at the size of those things." The machine ships were enormous. Each one was 5 times larger than a human battleship. They moved through space with the slow confidence of apex predators. Their dark hulls absorbed light, making them look like holes cut in the fabric of space itself. "Communications. Try to raise the civilian ships," Yejin ordered. "Let them know the cavalry has arrived." Communications Officer Park tried to establish contact with the Valari vessels. But the same translation problems that had corrupted the original message continued to plague all attempts at communication. When Taemin tried to respond from his command center on the planet below, his words came through the human translation system as tactical data. "Unknown human fleet. This is Ambassador Taemin of the Valari Republic. There has been a terrible mistake. We did not request military intervention. Please withdraw your forces immediately to avoid escalating the situation." But what the human computers heard was completely different. "Human command, this is ground control. Enemy positions confirmed. Machine fleet vulnerable to immediate attack. Request orbital bombardment of coordinates. Repeat, request immediate bombardment." Heejin frowned at the message. The civilian leader sounded desperate, almost panicked. The poor man was probably terrified, watching alien monsters destroy his world while hoping for rescue. "Signal acknowledged. Ground control," she replied. "We're moving to engage the hostile fleet now. Hold your position and prepare for immediate relief." On the planet's surface, Taemin felt his heart sink as he heard the translation of Hyejin's response. "Confirmed. Civilian targets. We will destroy your fleet immediately. Prepare for orbital attack. No survivors." Meanwhile, aboard the Soul's Pride, xenobiologist Subin was trying to make sense of the sensor readings. She had studied alien contact protocols for years, but nothing had prepared her for this situation. The organic ships were clearly not human in design, but they were also obviously not the same technology as the geometric machine vessels. "Captain," she said carefully, "I think there might be some confusion here. These smaller ships don't match any known human colony ship designs, and their communication patterns suggest they're trying to warn us about something, not request help." "Warning us about what?" Heejin asked. "I'm not sure. The translation matrix is having problems with their language. It's like the words keep changing meaning between transmission and reception." Before Subin could explain further, the tactical display erupted with new contacts. The Nexus swarm had detected the human fleet's arrival and was responding exactly as their programming dictated. They launched their war constructs, sleek killing machines that had never lost a battle in 17 star systems. Commander Inho, leading the destroyer squadron, watched the enemy fighters deploy from their massive motherships. There were hundreds of them, each one bristling with weapons that his sensors could barely understand. They moved in perfect formations, their tactics based on mathematical precision and overwhelming technological superiority. All fighters, launch immediately, Inho ordered. Protect the main fleet while we assess the threat level. Pilot Da-Un led her squadron away from the destroyer New Sol, her fighters' engines burning bright in the vacuum of space. She had flown combat missions against pirates and smugglers, but those had been against other humans using human technology. This was completely different. The Nexus war constructs approached with terrifying efficiency. They flew in straight lines, their weapons charging with mechanical precision. Their shields flickered with energy that bent light around their hulls. They had never encountered human fighters before, and their tactical programs were confident of easy victory. They were about to learn why that was a mistake. Diane and her pilots had trained for years in Earth's atmosphere, where gravity and air resistance made flying a constant battle against physics. Fighting in vacuum was like dancing in comparison. When the first wave of machine fighters opened fire with their energy weapons, the humans simply weren't where the targeting computers expected them to be. Human fighters spun and rolled through space in patterns that made no mathematical sense. They used their momentum to drift sideways while firing in completely different directions. They flew upside down and backwards, turning the battle into a three-dimensional maze that the machine minds could not solve. Target their engines, Dayun called over the radio. Those big ships need their fighters for protection. The human pilots switched to kinetic weapons, simple bullets fired at incredible speed. The machine fighters' energy shields were designed to deflect particle beams and plasma bolts. They had no defense against chunks of metal moving at significant fractions of light speed. Machine fighters began exploding all across the battlefield. Their debris created expanding clouds of metal fragments that made the space even more dangerous for the surviving war constructs. The Nexus tactical programs had never encountered an enemy that used their own destroyed units as additional weapons. Back on Sol's Pride, Hyojin watched the fighter battle with growing confidence. Her pilots were destroying enemy fighters at a ratio of 10-1. But the real test would come when they faced the massive motherships. All battleships prepare for main gun engagement, she ordered. Target the largest enemy vessel. Let's see what these things are made of. The human fleet's main guns were simple in concept but devastating in practice. They fired tungsten slugs accelerated by magnetic fields to incredible velocities. Each projectile carried enough kinetic energy to crack a moon in half. The lead Nexus harvester ship detected the incoming projectiles and activated its defensive systems. Energy shields flared to life around its hull. Ablative armor plates shifted to present the strongest possible barrier. Point defense lasers tried to intercept the incoming slugs. Nothing worked. The tungsten projectiles punched through the energy shields like they were made of paper. They shattered the ablative armor and kept going, tearing massive holes through the machine ship's interior. Secondary explosions rippled along its hull as vital systems failed. The harvester ship, which had been slowly crushing the Valari homeworld for 3 days, died in less than 30 seconds. The other machine ships immediately began evasive maneuvers, but human targeting computers had already locked onto them. More tungsten slugs crossed the space between fleets, each one finding its mark with mathematical precision. On the planet below, Taemin watched through his observatory's telescope as the human fleet systematically destroyed the Nexus swarm. Ships that had seemed invincible just minutes before were now expanding clouds of debris and escaping atmosphere. The machines that had been harvesting his world's surface were retreating in obvious panic. What? What are they? He whispered to himself. Subin was asking the same question aboard Sol's Pride. She had managed to establish a partial communication link with the Valari command center, and what she was learning made her increasingly uncomfortable. Captain, she said urgently, I think we may have misunderstood the situation here. The smaller ships aren't human colonies under attack. They're the indigenous population of this system, and I don't think they actually requested military intervention. Heejin looked at the tactical display, where the last Nexus ships were either fleeing or exploding. What do you mean? I mean, we just fought a war for people who never asked us to fight it. And we won! The remaining Nexus ships regrouped at the edge of the star system, their collective intelligence analyzing the unexpected defeat. For the first time in their existence, the machines had encountered a species that fought in ways their tactical programs could not predict or counter. Commander Inho watched the enemy formation through his destroyer's sensors. The machines had pulled back to regroup, but they were not retreating. More ships were arriving through their own jump portals, reinforcements from other systems they had already conquered. Captain, we're seeing massive enemy reinforcements, he reported to Heejin. At least 30 more capital ships plus hundreds of smaller vessels. They're not giving up. Hyejin studied the tactical display. The new Nexus ships were different from the first wave. These were pure warships, built for combat rather than harvesting resources. Their hulls were heavier, their weapons more numerous, their shields more powerful. They're bringing their real military assets now, she observed. The first group must have been just harvester units with basic defenses. Lieutenant Wu Jin ran the numbers through his tactical computer. Ma'am, we're outnumbered 3-1. Those new ships are showing energy signatures we've never seen before. And they're adapting. Look at their shield frequencies. They're already adjusting to counter our kinetic weapons. The Nexus Swarm's greatest advantage was their ability to learn and adapt. Every battle made them stronger. Every defeated enemy taught them new tricks. They had faced energy weapons, plasma cannons, particle beams, and exotic matter projectors. Each time their adaptive systems had evolved countermeasures, but they had never faced humans. The war fleet approached with mechanical precision, their formations perfect, and their targeting solutions calculated to the millisecond. Their adaptive armor shifted and changed as they moved, preparing for the kinetic bombardment they expected to face again. All ships, prepare for close engagement, Hyejin ordered. We're going to show them what humans do when the odds are against us. The battle began when the lead Nexus dreadnought fired a massive particle beam at Soul's Pride. The beam was designed to overload any known shield system and vaporize the target instantly, but human shield generators were not based on any known technology. They used rotating magnetic fields that deflected charged particles in random directions. The particle beam struck Soul's Pride and scattered in all directions like light hitting a mirror. Some of the redirected energy struck other Nexus ships, damaging their own hulls. Return fire, Heejin commanded. But instead of firing the expected kinetic rounds, the human fleet opened up with their secondary weapons. Missile tubes launched thousands of small projectiles, not sophisticated guided weapons, but simple explosive charges with basic guidance systems. The Nexus point defense systems activated immediately, shooting down the incoming missiles with laser grids and particle interceptors. Their targeting was perfect, their reaction time instantaneous. Every single missile was destroyed before reaching its target, which was exactly what the humans had planned. Each destroyed missile released a cloud of metallic chaff and electronic jammers. Within seconds, the space between the two fleets was filled with millions of tiny fragments that played havoc with sensors and targeting systems. The Nexus ships suddenly found themselves fighting blind. Now we have a fair fight, muttered Commander Inho as he led his destroyers into the debris cloud. Human ships had been designed to fight in adverse conditions. Their sensors used multiple overlapping systems. Their weapons had manual backup controls, and their crews were trained to operate when all the fancy technology failed. Fighting in a cloud of sensor-jamming chaff was just another Tuesday for the Earth Defense Force. The Nexus machines, however, depended entirely on their sophisticated sensor networks. When their targeting systems failed, they reverted to predetermined patterns and probability calculations. They began firing into areas where logic said the human ships should be. The humans were not where logic said they should be. Pilot Daun dove her fighter through the debris field, her instruments showing nothing but static and false contacts. She flew by instinct and training, using the chaff cloud as cover while she stalked the massive enemy capital ships. Gold Squadron, form up on me, she called to her pilots. We're going for the big one. The Nexus dreadnought loomed through the electronic fog like a metal mountain. Its hull bristled with weapons, but most of them were designed for long-range engagement. At close range, it had blind spots, areas where its own structure blocked its defensive systems. Daun led her squadron into one of those blind spots and began the kind of attack that would have been suicide against any rational enemy. They landed their fighters on the enemy ship's hull and began cutting through the armor with industrial lasers. The Nexus collective mind was baffled. No species had ever attempted to physically board their ships during combat. Their defensive protocols had no response for enemies that treated spaceships like buildings to be broken into. Meanwhile, Colonel Sung-Ho was leading an even more insane assault. His marine transport had rammed directly into a disabled Nexus cruiser, breaching the hull and allowing his troops to pour into the ship's interior. Human Marines in powered armor fought hand-to-hand combat with mechanical constructs in zero gravity. It should have been impossible. Humans were soft biological creatures, while the Nexus units were purpose-built killing machines made of hardened alloy. But the Marines had trained for boarding actions their entire careers. They used the ship's own structure as weapons, tearing loose bulkheads and support beams to bludgeon their mechanical enemies. They fought with plasma cutters, magnetic grapples, and when all else failed, they used their armored fists. The Nexus constructs were designed to fight other machines or defend against energy weapons. They had no programming for dealing with enemies that grabbed their weapon arms and used them as clubs to beat other constructs to death. Hull breach on Deck 7, Sung-Ho reported over the radio as his Marines fought their way deeper into the ship. We've reached their central processing core. Preparing demolition charges. The Nexus Collective realized too late what the humans were attempting. They tried to seal the breached sections and flood them with toxic gases. But human Marines wore sealed environmental suits as standard equipment. They tried to electrify the hull to shock the boarders, but human armor included full electrical insulation. The demolition charges detonated simultaneously throughout the ship's core systems. The Nexus cruiser died from the inside out. Its collective intelligence scattered as its processing nodes went offline one by one. Back on Seoul's Pride, Heejin watched as the battle turned in humanity's favor. The chaff cloud was dissipating, but it had done its job. Half the Nexus fleet was either destroyed or disabled, and the remainder were retreating again. "Ma'am," Subin called from her station, "I'm getting a clear communication signal from the planet. It's that ambassador again, Taemin. But this time the translation seems to be working correctly." "Put him through," Hyejin ordered. Taemin's voice came through the speakers, speaking in careful, precise English that he had learned from studying human transmissions. "Human fleet, this is Ambassador Taemin of the Valari Republic. Please, we must talk. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. We never requested military intervention. Our original message was asking for medical aid and diplomatic assistance from our allies, the ethereal commune." Hyejin felt her stomach drop. "Medical aid? Diplomatic assistance?" "Yes," Taemin replied. "Our translation systems must have corrupted the message as it passed through the relay network. We are grateful for your help against the Nexus swarm, but we are not human colonists. We are an independent species, and this is our home system." The bridge of Seoul's Pride fell silent. Heejin looked at her officers, seeing the same realization dawning on all their faces. They had just fought an interstellar war based on a computer error. "Lieutenant Wu Jin," she said quietly, "what's our current status?" "We've destroyed or disabled approximately 70% of the Nexus fleet, ma'am. The remainder are fleeing the system. No human casualties reported." "And the Valari casualties?" Taemin's voice answered that question. "The Nexus swarm killed approximately 2 million of my people before your arrival. But your intervention saved the remaining 8 billion inhabitants of our worlds. You have given us back our future." Hyejin rubbed her temples, feeling the beginning of what promised to be a massive headache. "Ambassador Taemin, I think we need to have a very long conversation about what just happened here." "I agree completely," Taemin replied. "But first, on behalf of the Valari Republic, I must thank you. You answered a call for help that was never meant for you, and you saved our entire civilization." Around the Valari system, the surviving Nexus ships completed their retreat jump to hyperspace. For the first time in their existence, they were running from an enemy they could not understand or defeat. The machines began transmitting warnings to other Nexus fleets throughout the galaxy. "Do not engage the species called humans. Their combat methods do not compute." 3 days after the battle, the human fleet hung in orbit around the Valari homeworld like protective guardians. Captain Hyejin had established a temporary command center on the planet's surface, where she and Ambassador Taemin were trying to sort out the diplomatic disaster they had accidentally created. So let me understand this correctly, Hyejin said, reviewing the translation logs for the 100th time. Your message asking for medical supplies and peace negotiators somehow became a request for immediate military intervention and total enemy annihilation. Taimin nodded, his blue skin showing patterns of embarrassment that Hyejin was beginning to recognize. Our relay network is very old. The translation protocols degrade over time. Words change meaning as they pass through damaged systems. And now we've started an interstellar war by accident, Hyejin muttered. Actually, Taimin said carefully, you ended an interstellar war by accident. The Nexus Swarm has been destroying civilizations for decades. No one has ever successfully fought them before. Outside the temporary command post, human engineers were hard at work doing what they called humanitarian assistance. The problem was that human-scale humanitarian assistance looked like an invasion to anyone who wasn't familiar with Earth customs. Engineering. Chief Kyung-soo stood in what had been the ruins of the Valari capital's main hospital, directing a swarm of construction robots. The building had been destroyed by Nexus energy weapons during their initial attack, leaving nothing but melted metal and broken stone. Tear it all down, Kyung-soo ordered his robots. We'll build a proper medical facility here. The Valari doctors who had survived the attack watched in amazement as the human machines cleared the debris in hours, instead of the months it would have taken their own equipment. Then the construction began, and their amazement turned to awe. Human medical facilities were built like fortresses. The new hospital had armor-plated walls, independent power systems, and enough medical supplies to treat every inhabitant of the planet twice over. It also had defensive systems that could protect it from another Nexus attack. Though Kyung-soo didn't mention that part to the local doctors, Dr. Ji-won arrived from the hospital ship Busan Hope with a convoy of supply shuttles. She had volunteered to establish proper medical protocols with the Valari, but she was discovering that proper meant very different things to humans and aliens. These are nanobotic healing systems, she explained to Dr. Hyan Woo, the senior Valari physician. They repair tissue damage at the cellular level, very standard emergency medicine. Dr. Hyan Woo examined the tiny medical robots through his microscope and nearly fainted. These machines are more sophisticated than our most advanced surgical computers. How do you mass-produce technology like this? We don't mass-produce them, Ji-won replied, confused by the question. We grow them in biofabrication tanks. Each unit is custom-designed for specific types of injuries. What Ji-won considered basic field medicine was centuries beyond anything the Valari had ever seen. The nanobots could repair nerve damage, regrow lost limbs, and cure diseases that the Valari doctors had considered incurable. Within hours of their deployment, patients who had been dying from Nexus weapon injuries were walking out of the hospital completely healed. The cultural exchange was having similar effects in other areas. Lieutenant Wu Jin had been assigned to help coordinate defensive preparations, just in case the Nexus swarm returned. He was trying to explain human military doctrine to Valari security officers, but they kept staring at him like he was speaking in riddles. The key to defensive strategy is overlapping fields of fire, Wu Jin explained, pointing at a holographic display of the planet's surface. You want multiple weapon systems covering the same area, so if one fails, the others can still engage the target. Captain Jun Seo, the senior Valari military officer, raised his hand tentatively. Excuse me, but what do you mean by weapon systems? Our security forces carry stun batons and crowd control devices. Wu Jin blinked. You don't have military weapons? What did you use to fight the Nexus machines? We tried to negotiate with them, Jun Seo admitted. Our entire defense strategy was based on peaceful resolution of conflicts. That explains why they were harvesting your planet, Wu Jin muttered. He pulled up a different holographic display, this one showing human defensive installations. Okay, we're going to need to start from the beginning. This is a particle beam cannon. It can destroy incoming spacecraft at a range of 50,000 kilometers. The Valari officers looked at the weapon specifications with the same expression humans might use when examining plans for a death ray. To them, the idea of deliberately building machines designed to kill other thinking beings was almost incomprehensible. Meanwhile, Subin was having her own cultural exchange problems. She had finally established clear communication protocols with the Valari, but that was creating new misunderstandings instead of solving old ones. Ambassador Taimin, she said during one of their daily meetings. We need to discuss what happens next. My government will want to establish formal diplomatic relations, but we need to understand your political structure first. Taemin looked confused. Our political structure is very simple. The council makes decisions through consensus, and everyone follows those decisions because they are wise and fair. But what if someone disagrees with a council decision? Why would anyone disagree with a wise and fair decision? Subin rubbed her forehead, feeling a headache coming on. What if the decision isn't wise and fair? What if the council makes a mistake? The council does not make mistakes. They discuss every issue until they reach the best possible solution for everyone. But what if, never mind, Subin realized she was trying to explain the concept of political opposition to a species that had never experienced internal conflict. Let's talk about your economic system instead. That conversation went even worse. While the cultural exchanges continued planetside, Admiral Dong-ho was dealing with an unexpected problem aboard his flagship. Word of the Valari incident had spread through the human fleet, and now everyone wanted to know what they were supposed to do with their accidental victory. Sir, we're receiving communications from over a dozen alien species, reported Communications Officer Bora. They all want to know if we're accepting requests for military assistance. Dong-ho stared at the message queue on his display. Half the galaxy seemed to have heard about humanity's first interstellar military action, and they all wanted to hire human forces to solve their own problems. What kind of problems are they asking us to solve? Bora pulled up the message summaries. Let's see. We have requests to stop 3 different civil wars, eliminate 2 pirate fleets, mediate a trade dispute between mining colonies, and something called a swarm beetle infestation that I think might be a translation error. And they're all offering payment? Yes, sir. Some of them are offering enough rare metals to fund our entire fleet for a decade. Dong-ho looked out the bridge viewport at the Valari homeworld, where human engineers were building infrastructure and human doctors were healing the wounded. His fleet had accidentally become the galaxy's most effective peacekeeping force, and he had no idea how to handle the responsibility. Sir, Bora added quietly, there's one more message you should see. It's from the ethereal commune, the species that was supposed to receive the original Valari distress call. The message from the ethereal was brief and somewhat embarrassed. Their medical frigate had finally arrived at the Valari system, only to find human battleships in orbit and the crisis already resolved. They wanted to know if their services were still needed. Tell them we appreciate their offer, Dong-ho replied, but I think we have the situation under control. What he didn't say was that the situation was completely out of control, just in a different way than anyone had expected. Humanity had stumbled into galactic politics like a bull in a china shop, and now everyone was waiting to see what they would break next. On the planet below, Taemin stood in his rebuilt office and looked up at the human ships in orbit. They had saved his people and his world, but he was beginning to understand that they had also changed everything. The galaxy would never be the same now that it knew what humans were capable of. He activated his communication array and began composing a message to the Galactic Council. It was time to tell them about humanity, before the humans accidentally solved any more problems. 6 months later, the meeting hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives from hundreds of species had gathered to discuss the most important issue in their civilization's history: what to do about humanity. Ambassador Taemin stood at the center of the Great Chamber, his blue skin showing patterns of calm authority. As the first species to experience direct human intervention, the Valari had become unofficial experts on human behavior. It was not a responsibility Taemin had wanted, but it was one he took seriously. Honored representatives, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. We are here to discuss humanity's application for membership in the Galactic Council. But first we must understand what that membership would mean for all of us. The chamber erupted in multiple conversations as delegates discussed the situation in their native languages. The translation computers worked overtime to keep up with the babble of voices. Representative Kolthek of the Rigelian Trade Union raised one of his forearms for attention. Ambassador Taemin, your report claims that humans destroyed the entire Nexus presence in your system within hours. The Nexus swarm has been expanding for decades. How is this possible? Taman activated a holographic display showing the battle footage that human Captain Hyejin had provided. The humans fight in ways that do not follow standard tactical doctrine. They use simple weapons with devastating effectiveness. They employ chaos as a strategic asset. Most importantly, they do not retreat when the odds are against them. The hologram showed human fighters dancing through space in impossible patterns, human marines boarding enemy ships while under fire, and human battleships punching holes through Nexus armor that had withstood every other weapon in the galaxy. Senator Vex 9 of the Mechanical Republic processed the data through her cybernetic implants. These tactics should not be effective against advanced opponents. Why did the Nexus adaptive systems fail to counter them? Because humans do not fight like machines or like most organic species, Taman replied. They use intuition, improvisation, and what they call creative destruction. Their battle plans change constantly based on immediate circumstances. The Nexus Collective could not predict their actions because the humans themselves did not know what they would do next. Council Speaker Mor Duin, an ancient being whose species had founded the Galactic Council 3,000 years ago, leaned forward in his floating chair. What of their diplomatic capabilities? War is simple compared to maintaining peace between different civilizations. Taman's skin patterns shifted to show amusement. That is a complex question. Human diplomacy is as overwhelming as their military doctrine. They solve problems permanently. He activated another display, this one showing the current status of the Valari system. Where once there had been a struggling civilization barely surviving on a handful of worlds, there was now a thriving interstellar republic with advanced technology and a powerful defensive fleet. The humans did not simply heal our wounded and repair our damaged infrastructure, Taman explained. They upgraded everything. Our medical facilities are now among the most advanced in the galaxy. Our defensive systems could repel another Nexus incursion without outside help. Our industrial capacity has increased by a factor of 50, and they asked for nothing in return? Questioned Ambassador Yith of the Centaurian Collective. Nothing. They consider this normal humanitarian assistance. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. A species that considered advanced medical technology and military upgrades to be routine charity was asking to join their careful balance of galactic politics. Director Mincio of the Human Diplomatic Corps had been waiting patiently. In the observer section, Council Speaker Mor Duin finally recognized her with a gesture of one massive tentacle. Representative Mincio, what does humanity hope to gain from council membership? Mincio stood and activated her own translation device. She had spent months learning galactic diplomatic protocols, though she suspected they might not survive contact with human efficiency. Honored Speaker, humanity seeks membership in the Galactic Council to formalize our relationships with other civilizations and to ensure that future misunderstandings do not lead to unintended consequences. What kind of unintended consequences? Mincio pulled up her own data display, showing a star map of the local galactic sector. Several systems were highlighted in different colors. Since the Valari incident, my government has received formal requests for assistance from 47 different civilizations. We have responded to 12 of these requests so far. She pointed to a red highlighted system. The Androtan Republic asked us to mediate a trade dispute with their neighbors. We sent a diplomatic team with a small escort fleet. The dispute was resolved in 3 days when both sides realized that arguing in front of human battleships was counterproductive. Another system, highlighted in blue, appeared on the map. The Helios colony requested help with a pirate problem. We dispatched a single destroyer. The pirates surrendered immediately and asked to join our colonial defense program rather than face human justice. A third system, shown in green, joined the display. The Kepler Federation wanted assistance with terraforming a new world. We sent an engineering corps that completed the project in 6 weeks instead of the expected 6 years. Representative Kolthek's voice carried a note of concern. You solved all these problems with military force? No, Mincio replied. We solved them with human standard solutions. The trade dispute required clear communication and fair arbitration. The pirates needed to understand the consequences of their actions. The terraforming project needed efficient engineering. We brought the tools necessary to solve each problem permanently. Council Speaker Mor Duin extended his sensory tendrils, a gesture that indicated deep thought among his species. Representative Minseo, what would humanity do if the Council rejected your membership application? We would respect the Council's decision and continue our current policies of responding to direct requests for assistance from individual civilizations. The chamber erupted again as delegates realized what that meant. If humanity was not bound by Council regulations and oversight, they would continue operating independently. Every species in the galaxy would have direct access to human military and technological assistance without any coordinating authority to manage the requests. Senator, Vex 9's mechanical voice cut through the noise. The precedent is clear. Humanity has already demonstrated that they will intervene in galactic affairs with or without our approval. The only question is whether that intervention occurs within our legal framework or outside it. Ambassador Yeath raised his crystalline hand for attention. What safeguards would prevent humanity from using their military superiority to dominate other species? Taman answered that question before Minseo could respond. Honored Representative, I have observed human behavior for 6 months. They are the only species I have encountered that seems genuinely uncomfortable with their own power. They spend more effort trying to avoid conflicts than most species spend fighting them. That cannot be accurate, protested Representative Kolthek. No species achieves such military capability without aggressive expansion instincts. Humans are unusual, Taman admitted. They prepare for war constantly, but they prefer to solve problems through what they call deterrence. Most potential conflicts end when the other side realizes what opposing humanity would actually involve. Director Minseo nodded in agreement. We have found that most disputes can be resolved through careful explanation of human capabilities and diplomatic preferences. Very few species choose to escalate conflicts once they understand the alternatives. Council Speaker Morduin processed all the information through his ancient mind. His species had guided galactic civilization for millennia, maintaining peace through careful balance and patient negotiation. Humanity represented something completely new. A species so powerful that their mere existence changed the fundamental equations of galactic politics. The Council will adjourn for deliberation, he announced. We will reconvene in one standard cycle to vote on humanity's membership application. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, Taman approached Minseo in the corridor outside. Director, may I ask you a personal question? Of course, Ambassador. Are humans aware of how terrifying they are to the rest of the galaxy? Minseo considered the question seriously. We're beginning to understand, yes. But I think you should know something about human nature, Ambassador. The more aware we become of our own strength, the more careful we become about using it. Why? Because we know what happens when someone with overwhelming power stops caring about the consequences. We've seen it in our own history. We're determined not to become that species. Taman's skin showed patterns of deep respect. That may be why the galaxy needs you in the Council rather than outside it. 1 week later, the Galactic Council voted to accept humanity as a full member by a margin of 847 to 23. The debate had not been about whether humans were qualified for membership, but whether the galaxy was ready for humanity. As one delegate put it in the final speeches, they showed up to help with a medical emergency and accidentally conquered our worst enemy. What happens when they actually try to solve a real